psychological safety is hugely important because I come back to the point, try and find the smartest and most passionate people you can, recruit them and retain them, and then let them do their best work for the organisation. And that means that they have to be able to be empowered to work, and they have to be able to turn around and say, no, I don't think that's the right way forward. I think that's wrong. And certainly my team does. If you ask them, they are, a frank team that communicates really well, and they're willing to kind of raise views and challenge things, which is fantastic. That makes me better at my job. I'm very grateful for that kind of environment to work in with my team. So I think, yes, it's hugely important. When you're going on to projects, are you kind of forming and storming quite a lot of the time? Yeah, definitely. And people have to get used to working in different kind of groupings. But again, I think you learn, from projects, but you also really learn from people. And what's really lovely about the RHS is that, you're working with scientists, you're working with horticulturalists, you're working with people with just really different backgrounds or training or skill sets than I have. And I find that really energizing. And I hope the teams do as well.
How out in the open are these teams working? So we are definitely in the spirit of working out in the open when we're pulling together multidisciplinary teams, and we're normally blended with organisations we're working with, but it's kind of showing work in progress, being open about learnings and challenges. Like, what's the culture of sharing learnings, good and bad, within the organisation?
I think there's always room for improvement on that. That continuous improvement is really vital. But I think it is pretty good. And I think, again, you can borrow some techniques from the kind of digital world there about doing a project and having a retro about it. What was good? What was bad? What could we do differently next time? Did we get that quite right? And I think that culture of curiosity and continuous improvement is important, and it makes all of us humble because nothing was ever executed perfectly. So, if you kind of look back on it, there's always room for improvement. I think that is just culturally really important. And you think of the RHS and growing plants and gardens, they are themselves in kind of constant change, times of the year, the weather. And so again, that's kind of inherent in our culture, I think, that sense of things always changing and what can we do better and how are we going to change or improve this, which makes it a really nice culture to work in.
Yeah. And as sort of leaders in the organisation, because we've definitely worked with some where actually there's a fear of failure within the organisation, which makes it difficult to experiment, to test. And so, there's a big sort of, I guess, role for leaders to play with an organisation to actually create that space. I guess, Rebecca, what you were saying about psychological safety, but also kind of creating the conditions for innovation, for curiosity, for ideas to kind of flourish.
Yeah.
What's your view on kind of leaders being able to create that space?
I think it's hugely important, isn't it, that people feel that they can take the right level of risk to experiment and innovate and try something new. A lot of our organisation is very creative. If you think of the creative experience of a garden or of a show. And so I think people are always looking actually to want to do new and more and exciting things. And I think bringing that kind of creativity together, again, going back to that point on, can you give people the data? Can you teach testing frameworks that allow us to ask, is this the right thing to do? Let's innovate this and let's see what happens. I think that's really important because then, again, it's not a conversation about opinion or who in the room is more senior to the other person. It's merely like, let's test this, and then what does the data tell you afterwards?
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting point that you make about sort of the makeup of creativity in an organisation, because by definition, that's a sort of discipline that's much more open to, iteration, work in progress, being comfortable with having your work critiqued, looking to develop it and collaborate. But it sounds as if you're really living kind of agile in its sort of, in spirit. And I think lots of organisations say to us, we need to be more agile. What does it mean? I think it's just like this badge, this diploma, and it's just sort of progress over perfection. Get the basics nailed right, know where you're going, but know that you might have to deviate at some point.
Yeah, and I think it's about, if you take on board that continuous iteration, that continuous improvement, that you're kind of honing in on the target. You never quite get there. You're always course correcting. I think that feels like what working life is, to be honest, as an experience. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
Talking of innovation and experimentation. So you've got your Grow app. And so it would be great to understand, like, what was the insight behind that and what's the sort of outcome that you're trying to achieve with that. And I guess probably building on Rebecca's point, that's a whole nother data ecosystem that exists now within the organisation. How is that kind of coming back in to help the wider mission?
Yeah. And the data is fascinating, right? So the Grow app was really, we had this was part of a kind of a conversation, a thread around digital transformation, because we have very large volumes of people coming to our website for gardening advice. So we see above 26 million people a year coming to the RHS digital platform looking for gardening advice. And that had always been a kind of look for the information, read it, and then kind of go and do it, which for me was lacking something in experience. And we kind of felt there was this space for a more digital type of engagement with the RHS that looked, I guess, a little bit about membership, because, you're engaging and you're supporting the charity on a kind of repeat billing basis as a supporter, as a donor. But rather than wanting to come and visit the places and spaces, you possibly live a little bit further away from one of our gardens, but you really want the gardening advice. And so the Grow app was something we developed. People can record all the plants in their garden or their home on it, and we give them gardening tips. We've got an AI-powered chat botanist, which was trained by our fantastic horticultural advisory team. So it is just the advice of the RHS, not the kind of wilds of the internet, kind of adding to that. So it's a quality source of advice, and we've kind of got plant combinations on it. So it's just a really useful tool for the audiences who are using it. And for us, it's a really important resource because we therefore understand what people are growing in their gardens, what is working for them, what's not working for them. And as a science resource, understanding cultivated plants kind of mapped across the UK, that's a really, really useful resource for, some of the work that we're doing in science and kind of future resilience of the UK and our plants.
Yeah. And does that sort of data, I assume, holds value outside of the organisation if we think about kind of broader sustainability, the impact of the climate? And so are you able to kind of share that expertise and that data and insight, for broader, I guess, change or impact outside of just the RHS?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that collaboration happens through our scientists. So as well as the scientists that we have who work on site for the RHS and who are, constantly collaborating with their peers in different organisations, the RHS also funds and mentors PhDs in universities around the country. So that information, that kind of flow of information and scientific knowledge is part of the RHS, and that data from RHS Grow also then feeds into that information and how that is shared and how people use that for different projects and programmes as well.